Hello, everyone. My name is Dawn Richards, and I'm the Director of Patient and Public Engagement at Clinical Trials Ontario, or CTO. My role at CTO is to help trial teams engage patient and public members to help them with designing and doing their clinical trials. And my role also involves bringing evidence-informed and credible information to people so that they can make their own decisions about potentially participating in clinical trials or just learning more about clinical trials. So today I'm joined here by Dr. Bernard Thebaud, who is a physician, a researcher, a trialist. He's lots of things, and I'm gonna get him to introduce himself before we get into the heart of the video. So Bernard, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I'm Dr. Bernard Thebaud. I'm a neonatologist. This is a doctor that takes care of babies. And I'm also a scientist at the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute and at the CHEO Research Institute. And I'm very happy to share my experience with those 6 myths about clinical trials.
Perfect. I'm looking so forward to speaking with you. And so, as you just said, we've heard from a lot of people that there's a lot of misconceptions about clinical trials out there. There's lots of sources of information, but people aren't sure what's credible, what's trustworthy. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at 6 common myths about clinical trials. And I'm going to ask Bernard to give us the facts behind those myths. And we've collected these myths from our patient and public partners. So they move in lots of circles and they hear lots of people talk about trials. So here we go. The first myth that we'd like to bust is that clinical trials are dangerous. Bernard, what do you say when you're confronted with that myth?
I would like to say that clinical trials are not dangerous. They are important and the most rigorous way to test the safety and efficacy of a new treatment, for example. And there are different types of trials. There's a phase 1 trial that tests the safety of a medication in a very few number of healthy volunteers or in patients. And then there are phase 2 trials that test the safety and efficacy of a medication in a larger number of patients. In this type of trial, half the patients would receive a placebo and the other half will receive the medication. And this is done in a blinded fashion so that the results can be interpreted without bias. And then ultimately there's a phase 3 trial, which will then test in a much larger number of patients if a medication truly improves the health of patients or not. Also, it has been shown that participating in a clinical trial, whether a participant receives the placebo or the treatment group, improves the outcome of patients compared to non-participating patients receiving standard of care. So clearly, clinical trials are not dangerous. They are very important.
Can I also ask you to expand? You talked about placebo, and I want to be very clear because we hear this sometimes too, that people say like, I don't want to be in a trial because I might be on placebo. But if there's a standard of care that's already out there for a specific condition or disease, would people be in a trial that has a placebo group per se?
So this is a very good comment. If there is a standard of care and one wants to test a new treatment, then the patients would be, or the participants would be allocated to either that standard of care treatment compared to, or the new medication to be tested.
Okay, excellent. Okay, our second myth is that clinical trials are like a last resort. They're only for people who are really sick or people who have no other treatment options. And I wanted to pick up on one thing you just talked about, that in phase 1 trials, sometimes healthy participants are in those trials. So it sounds like you already started to bust the myth with the first myth. So what else do you say about clinical trials are a last resort?
Yeah, this is correct. So it really depends what type of clinical trials we're talking about. And as you said, Healthy volunteers can also participate in a trial, in a phase 1 trial. And this is very important to test the safety of a given medication. But there are different types of clinical trials too. There are some that test a medication, and there are others that would test, for example, a new indicator or so-called biomarker of a disease. And again, those clinical trials are the only way to really prove or disprove that the medication or biomarker has value.
Okay, great. So our third myth is about agreeing to participate in a clinical trial. And some people think that once you've signed up, like that's it, you're in the trial, you can't change your mind. What do you say about that myth, Bernard?
So this is another myth and clearly untrue. A participant in a trial can decide at any point before, during, after a trial to change his mind and to leave the trial without providing any justification. And this will not change in any way the care that's provided to this patient. And this is also clearly stated in the informed consent form that every patient receives in order to decide if she or he wants to participate in a trial. So participants can really be completely reassured that they have the free choice to leave a trial at any point.
And what would you recommend if someone is considering leaving a trial? Would you tell them to maybe talk to the trial team to make sure any questions are answered? Might they have to undergo some tests before they leave? Just maybe you can let them know a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Participants should discuss with the clinical trial coordinator or the doctor that's in charge of that trial to make sure that this is all good and that no additional tests are required. And just to have the peace of mind that this is completely fine to leave the trial.
Okay, great. So we have another myth here that clinical trials only happen in hospitals. What do you say to that myth?
So clinical trials can happen outside hospitals, for example, in doctors' offices or community clinics. Here again, it really depends on the purpose of the trial and the type of disease to be explored. And so most of the trials happen in hospitals, but depending on the disease, it can be done in a doctor's office as well, especially when it comes to looking at long-term outcomes, very long-term outcomes, or in community clinics as well. All depends on the nature, the purpose of the trial.
Okay. Our next myth is that when you participate in a trial, you don't know any of the details about the trial or the treatments that you might take when you're in the trial.
Yeah, so clearly as a participant in a clinical trial, you should be fully informed and should know all the details about a trial in order to decide if you want to participate or not. And so the informed consent form, again, contains all the information, and it should be written in a way that is understandable to everyone. Participants can then also ask additional questions and should ask additional questions to the doctor or the clinical trial coordinator to ensure that they are really comfortable in saying yes or no to participating in the trial.
Are there other people who are part of the trial team that people talk to as well? Like if there's a pharmacist involved in the trial, could you talk to the pharmacist about what might happen getting your treatment and the potential risks and benefits just to make sure you're feeling okay about things?
Yeah, absolutely. The participant, the patient should be able to have access to anyone who is involved in the trial, a pharmacist who knows everything about the medication, or nurses, clinical trial coordinators, physicians, respiratory therapists. Anyone should be able to be available to answer any questions a participant may have.
Okay, great. I think that's really important for people to know is they may have kind of that one main contact that they interface with being in a trial, but there's many other people that they might be able to chat with if they've got other questions that make more sense for someone else as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. Our last myth is that my doctor will tell me if there's a clinical trial I should join. What's been your experience here?
So your doctor may not know of all the clinical trials that exist in the world, and but your doctor has access to an online database where all clinical trials are registered, and being registered is usually a good sign with regards to clinical trial credibility. So your doctor can check in this database if there's a trial that could be appropriate for a given participant.
Okay, excellent. So hopefully we've done a good job of busting a lot of these myths, or busting all of these myths that we came up with our patient and public partners. Dr. Thebaud, I'd really like to thank you for your time today. And I think you gave really concise and easy to understand answers to the facts behind our myths. I just want to let the people know watching. So A, thank you for watching, and B, if you'd like to learn more about trials, whether it's helping you make a decision or just learning more about them, we'll have a link for you that's part of the video, or a QR code, so you can go to our website and you can learn more about things. And I think we just want to leave people with the idea that ask as many questions as you need to ask about a trial, or to get the answers that you need before you make a decision. So thanks very much for joining us, everyone.
Thank you very much for having me.